Hey, what's going on, guys? This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. I'm Norman James along with Mike Jello. Mike, are the Boston Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup in 2019? Because they're in the Final Four. They're going to take out the Canes and wipe the floor with the Sharks or the Blues. Hello, by the way. Long time no talk.
Good evening, Norm. They're down to the Final Four, so they have an opportunity, obviously. They've been one of the better teams in this postseason. I've never been a big believer in the Canes, although you can't take anything away from them for beating the Capitals and then sweeping the Islanders. But the Bruins, they have the goaltending. Their defense has played well for them, and they have that line of Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak. And if they continue to score and dominate, then it's going to be a tough task for teams to beat them. And I don't put anything past Carolina, and I think that one of the teams in the West will give them a tussle. But if I had to give a favorite right now, it would be the Bruins.
People are going to hate me for this, but the Bruins are good. The Bruins deserve respect, and haters going to hate. But when you're good, people want to be just as good as you. And when they're not, they don't like you. So I think the Bruins have as good a chance as the other three teams still left in the Stanley Cup playoffs to win the Stanley Cup. It would be nice to see the San Jose Sharks win as well. Joe Thornton, how many years has he been in the league now? 25. The beard has been growing for 15 or so. It's down to his skates. It would be nice to see Father Time and the San Jose Sharks finally pull one out of the hat, too. They haven't won a Stanley Cup yet. Neither have the Blues. This Final Four I'm extremely interested in. This is the Leafs Convo podcast, so we should talk a little bit about the Toronto Maple Leafs as well as the Toronto Marlies, who are facing the Charlotte Checkers. Travis Dermott, about to undergo shoulder surgery, and it looks like he's going to be gone for 6 months. Will this guy be back by Christmas? And how does this affect Kyle Dubas and what he wants to do in terms of restructuring the Leafs blue line for the season to come?
The Dermott news, coming on the heels of other news today, was a double blow for the Leafs. It puts them in a precarious position because we know, as we've talked about on the Convo for the last few months, more than likely Jake Gardiner has played his last game in blue and white. I don't think they're going to be able to afford to re-sign him based on what he'll get on the open market. I know that he probably wants to come back, but they're just not going to pay him what he can get. And Ron Hainsey may retire. He may want to go someplace else. He may not want to take less to come back for another year. And now Dermott, who I think would have been penciled in to step into the top four, he's going to be out until, or it sounds, at least November. And that is a blow because right now, you look at the defense for next year, it's Muzzin, it's Riley, Zaitsev is probably going to be in your top four unless he's traded. Dermott was one of those guys who moves up, and they expected him to take a step forward now, and this is directly related to the injury that happened right after the deadline, the Brad Malone hit that hit him into the boards, and this is probably clean up on that shoulder, which he injured. He'll be back, obviously. He'll be back in the season, but he'll miss all of training camp, and he'll miss probably at least the first month. And we know that players take enough time to get up to speed if they miss training camp or miss the first, say, 10 to 15 games of the season. So this makes Kyle Dubas, I think, have to focus even more on acquiring some help on the blue line. Either that, or it makes him, accelerate the recall of Erasmus Sandin or Timothy Liljegren. But how many young guys can you have on a blue line?
No question. And how can you sell a bill of goods that is focused on contending and winning a Stanley Cup when you don't have the horses on your blue line, Michael? That was a concern after the Bruins eliminated the Leafs and is more of a concern now. Kyle Dubas has his work cut out for him, Mike. And I am quite concerned not about the Leafs' long-term future, but the team's immediate future. This team should be entering its contention prime, shouldn't it? And there are already questions surrounding the defense. Now a guy like Travis Dermott might not make it back into the lineup until Christmas. I'm sorry, you cannot have a untenured, green, inexperienced defensive group trying to do anything of substance in the NHL, especially when your forward group is certainly going to be considered one of the best in the league, and wanting to up its overall game after what happened against the Bruins a month ago.
This is the task in front of Kyle Dubas. It's the fact that, I think you have to address and first and foremost, you have to address whether you can get Hainsey back, because, and it's sad that they really have to depend on on what Ron Hainsey wants to do. But if Ron Hainsey wants to come back, they know what they'll be getting out of him. Although I think that you have to assume that he can't continue to play 22, 23 minutes a night as a top pairing defenseman. I mean, if Babcock accepts that reality, then, bringing him back again to be sort of a bottom pairing guy who can play with one of these young guys would be a good move. But it's probably, you look at what this team has done in terms of free agents, European free agents over the last week or two, signing Igor Korshkov, their 2016 second-round pick, signing Ilya Mikheyev, the KHL forward. They brought in a Finnish defenseman Timu Kiviami, and I may be butchering the name, but they're bringing in depth. They're bringing in guys who I think they hope, at best-case scenario, will be candidates to play for the Leafs. They're stocking up at forward. It means that they're probably, in terms of cap and in terms of having to address their defense, have to trade from the position of strength to address the position of weakness. That is going to be the focus. I don't know who that means. It could mean Kapanen. It could mean Janssen. It could mean William Nylander. It could mean Nazem Kadri. But they're going to have to, especially now with Dermott out of the picture until probably American Thanksgiving, they're going to have to address that issue because it's going to be a problem.
William Nylander is the most attractive target to other teams. He's locked in long-term. If the Leafs can bring back something that they truly need, more defensive help, experienced defensive help, tenured defensive help, and William Nylander is the piece to go, then you have to make that deal now more than ever. Nazem Kadri, what are you going to get for him? Kasperi Kapanen, Andreas Johnson. These guys are good, but they're not at Nylander's level. The stat guys will tell you that he's among the elite when 5-on-5. He's great. Okay, well, that doesn't just mean when you are juxtaposing Mitch Marner. Those are stats that are league-wide. Everybody knows it. So those stats are just as attractive to other teams wanting to get him as they are to you trying to tear down his contemporaries on the team. This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. Travis Dermott is not going to be back till October, November. Let him take his time. He's a young cat. He's got his career ahead of him. The Leafs are going to need him going forward. And who knows, maybe the season to come is less productive than the season we just saw. And we may all have to buckle up for it. John Tavares suffers an oblique injury at Team Canada practice. I hope nobody's going on about the idiocy of playing for your country when you were still kind of pissed off that you're not playing deep into the Stanley Cup playoffs. It is what it is.
Well, I mean, it's not an idiocy to play for his country. It just seems that John Tavares has bad luck when it comes to playing for his country because we know that he tore a couple, I think it was an MCL and a meniscus in 2014 at the Sochi Olympics. And, now I don't know how, this could be, a serious injury. It could be, just an injury or it's a pull and, it'll take some of the off season to repair. Even if it is a serious injury, I don't believe if it's an oblique tear that he would, that the recovery time would be enable for him to play in training camp. So, I mean, we'll find out over the next few days the severity of the injury and what it is. But, it's not encouraging. I mean, it's just been right now. You've had Matthews have off-season surgery. You've had Dermott and Tavares. It's
Hyman.
Just one thing after another. And Zach Hyman is probably going to be out until around the same time that Dermott is. So you're talking significant, players missing the beginning of the season. And as we saw this year, the start of the season was when this team really made hay, when they really gained a lot of momentum. and then they struggled in the second half. They're going to have to be able to do that without some of their key players.
They made hay in the early part of this past season, Mike, but their overall game wasn't anything to write home about. You thought things would sort out, but the Leafs could never really get going. Add to all of this misery, Mike Babcock is going to return as head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs for a fifth season?
Like it was any big surprise. I mean, the funny thing was, and a lot of people noted this, was that Babcock's name started to get mentioned, not because there was any connection other than Ken Holland was his general manager in Detroit. But when Ken Holland got the Edmonton Oilers job, and obviously everybody knows that they're going to be looking for a coach, and there are not many coaches out there right now after Philadelphia and other teams have filled in their positions. If Babcock was in the loop or out of the loop in Toronto, that maybe that would be a direction where he'd go. As soon as those things started popping up and Bob McKenzie and Darren Dreger started openly wondering whether that was a possibility, they announced that Babcock was going to be back. So, I mean, I get the feeling here that Dubas was basically teaching Babcock a little bit of a lesson and saying, your job is not safe because I'm the general manager and I'm going to tell you if you're back or not. But he nipped it in the bud as soon as the rumor started.
If the Leafs defense is as young as we think it's going to be, does Mike Babcock want to be the head coach here? Because he's on a short leash. Sheldon Keefe may be coming off a second straight Calder Cup championship. All the young fans love Sheldon Keefe because he's a young guy and he's adaptive. Does Mike Babcock even want to come back to this situation?
Well, I mean, from everything that's been reported, yes, he does. So, I mean, I can't question that. I mean, I think what is going on here is that for Babcock to have success, he's going to need Kyle Dubas to go out and get him the players that he thinks he needs to win. And I mean, the recruiting of Mikheyev, the Russian who played for Omsk, who the Leafs signed earlier this week, it started last year with Babcock going to the World Championships in Europe and having some contact with him, and then apparently using Nikita Zaitsev and Igor Ozaganov and Pavel Datsyuk, his former player with the Red Wings, to sort of help this guy along and say, yes, you want to go over to the North America, and Mike Babcock, because he'll be good for you, and that is what happened. So I think that Babcock is going to basically say to Dubas, if you want results, you're going to have to get me the players that I need.
I don't mean to get conspiratorial here. If he doesn't, and the Leafs, at least on paper, look to take a step back in the name of developing these young defensemen right and allowing players like Travis Dermott to convalesce and ease his way back into the mix and keeping William Nylander in the fold, you have to think the writing's going to be on the wall for Mike Babcock unless he is able to totally modify his coaching style and his belief system to what the Maple Leafs may have planned going forward. Interesting. Forget about the Leafs now. They're out. Let's talk about the Toronto Marlies. They just took down the Cleveland Monsters 4-0 in round 2 of the Calder Cup playoffs, moving on to take on the Charlotte Checkers. If you thought Sheldon Keefe's star was bright around the time that Mike Babcock didn't play his star player in Game 7, look at the star now that Sheldon Keefe is. Like, there's just so much belief in this guy, so much hype surrounding this guy. And, he's also the beneficiary of having a really good AHL team, and it's showing.
Yeah, I mean, there was hype before this winning streak with Sheldon Keefe. It's more impressive that he's, gone 7-0, and the Marlies have gone 7-0, and the fact that they're doing it with a very young defense. I mean, the last few games of that series against Cleveland, they're playing 4 defensemen under the age of 22, with Liljegren, Sandin, Mac Hollowell from Sault Ste. Marie, and Joseph Dusek, who is a free agent signing. Sure. 4 young defensemen, so that's impressive. And it's you look at that team and the way they're playing. It's not just on that defense. The team plays a team defensive concept. Everybody buys in. The thing is, it's like, and it came out today. because one of the coaching candidates around the NHL, a Swedish coach named Rickard Gronborg, took a job in Switzerland, and he was supposedly on the wish list of the Buffalo Sabres, and Buffalo has been mentioned in connection to Sheldon Keefe. If you're Sheldon Keefe and you're getting a new contract with the Marlies, and you know that it's probably very probable. It's probable that Mike Babcock is not going to finish out the 8-year contract that he had with the Leafs. I mean, I think, he's got this year, he's got next year to really turn things around and win. If that's the case, then why would Keefe leave for Buffalo or Ottawa or something like that when he has an opportunity to play with the Marlies or to coach the Marlies the next couple of years and be under the general manager he's been with the entire time he's been in professional and junior hockey? So I don't think Sheldon Keefe is going anywhere. I really don't.
OGs, converts, fans of the podcast, hate listeners, let us know inside the YouTube comment section or on the community platform. Do you think the Leafs might take a step back the season to come in order to allow Sheldon Keefe to kind of lay in wait, let the defense heal, let the young guys work their way into the process, and Mike Babcock essentially will be on his way out at some point? Or do you think Kyle Dubas is going to do whatever he can to help continue the Leafs' climb as Mike Babcock sees fit, perhaps accelerating things to give Babs, every possible opportunity to lead this team to the promised land? Is it Keefe or Babcock going forward? Let us know inside the YouTube comment section. Are the Toronto Marlies, from what you've seen, destined for a second straight Calder Cup championship here, Mike?
I don't know about destiny. I know that they've been impressive. I know they've exceeded expectations based on, they're not as strong as they were last year. I mean, but they've been getting really good goaltending out of Kazimir Kaskasuo. They're getting opportunistic scoring. Their power play is really good. And of course, I got into a little bit of an argument on social media with a few people about Jeremy Bracco and my belief that Jeremy Bracco could be in the NHL as soon as next year if the Leafs have to trade somebody that we've talked about many a time.
Don't bother with it, Mike.
Yeah, I look at the way Brian, you mentioned when we were preparing for the podcast, the play that Bracco made in the game against Cleveland. I mean, that play where he sets up Michael Carcone for a power play goal. I mean, I'm not saying that he can do that at the NHL level because the defense is a lot better, but the skill set that he displayed with, he's leading the Marlies in playoff scoring. I believe he's leading the AHL unless somebody out west has topped him. I mean, he's leading the team in power play assists all time in this playoff run, and they played 2 series. I'm sorry. I think this guy, defensively he needs work, but I think that Bracco, along with Trevor Moore and Pierre Engvall, these are guys. Mason Marchman, who had 2 goals earlier in Game 4. These are guys who I think are going to be on the radar for the Leafs simply because they may be ready and they're cheap.
Oh my God. The Nylander cult is driving me nuts. Can Jeremy Bracco set up own goals like William Nylander can? I bet he can't. Good Lord. The Charlotte Checkers and the Raleigh Hurricanes. These are great hockey times in Carolina.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're drawing well at the PNC Arena, and actually, the one benefit for the Marlies here, the series that they're playing will not start until next Friday. But the one benefit is that the Hurricanes are in the playoffs because they have to have a group of reserves ready to play, and some of those players were players for Charlotte. I know that they called up like a defenseman like Jake Bean, who was one of their first round picks, and he might still be up there as a reserve player. So that keeps Charlotte weaker because their parent club hasn't sent some of their eligible players back down to the AHL. So the Marlies are going to have to take and can take advantage of that early in the series. Okay.
If you're betting all of that big time Leaf reporter, Marley reporter money you make, and that Leafs Convo money you make, those pennies, Do you? How much do you put down on the Marlies winning a second straight Calder Cup?
I can't remember the last time there were a consecutive Calder Cup.
Exactly.
So I mean, it would be quite an achievement. It depends who comes out of the West. I know that it was San Diego and Bakersfield were playing, and those are strong clubs out west. And they're not going to have the benefit of home ice advantage because they finished third in the North Division this year. So it's going to be tough. But the way that they're playing right now, let's just say if I could get odds like Country House in the Kentucky Derby, I would take those.
Wow. All right. I've got the Bruins to beat the Hurricanes in 6. I've got San Jose to take down St. Louis in 7. And then St. Louis will beat the Bruins to win their first ever Stanley Cup in 7 games. You?
I have the Bruins in 7. I have the Bruins in 6. I have the Sharks in 7, and I haven't picked the final yet. I'll wait until the final comes.
And finally, we know he had more points than Marner 5-on-5, and he played with a couple of losers. But William Nylander is still considered trade bait this offseason. What are the odds he's dealt?
I'd say about 2-1, like 35% he's traded, 65% he stays. It all depends on the value that they get back. If they can get a defenseman who's under contract for a reasonable amount in the deal, and there are teams out there that I think need offense, and that were interested in him before he signed the contract in December. If Dubas can get a good return, I think he's going to need the cap room to be able to sign Marner. So I think there's a decent chance he gets moved.
I don't think this is about William Nylander anymore. I don't think it's about Mitch Marner. I think it's about Sheldon Keefe or Mike Babcock, Mike. And that's what's going to be really interesting to see over the months ahead. It actually won't be very interesting because if it's about Sheldon Keefe and the plan forward with the Cats on the Marlies and the young guys learning on the Leafs defensive core right now, it's not going to be an interesting summer because there's not a lot that's going to take place transaction-wise. But if Mike Babcock gets one last good kick at the can with the arsenal he needs, then buckle up. Mike, it's been fun. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norm.
We would like to thank Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, title sponsor of the Leafs Convo, demonstrating passion for the industry and a superior level of excellence in selling, leasing, and marketing your property. Vanguard Northeast Realty.